Okay, so the composition is now dry from its first layer of paint, and what I want to look at now is adding on detail and some of those really lovely mark making experiments that we explored right back at the beginning of year 7. Now there's 2 ways that we're going to do this. We're going to add on some marks, and then we're also going to use a technique called sgraffito, where we paint onto and then scratch away the paint that we've just applied to reveal the paint underneath. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention in my last video, and now's a good opportunity for us to discuss this, is when you're painting, it makes much more sense whenever you're doing anything like this to start at the top and work down, because you're essentially leaning on top of dry paint. If you start at the bottom and work up, then it's a bit harder. If, however, when you start to get to the end, you're having to reach over, you can do what I did in my last video, and you may have noticed me doing this, which is just to turn your composition around. But generally speaking, if you start at the top and work your way down, it makes itself a bit easier. And when we're at this stage, that's completely fine. You've got your base layer on, and now we're just starting to add in those bits of detail. So we're going to go through this idea of sgraffito first. I'm going to start in this section just here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using a fair amount of white in this part of the project, because it's going to help to lighten up this composition. It's going to make it look a bit lighter, going to make it look a bit fresher. So I'm going to put on top of here a nice thickish coating of white paint across the surface, like so. So I'm covering up that pink with a nice thick coating of white. Rinse my brush off, and then just dry the end off with a bit of tissue paper, and then using the other end of my brush, I can now scratch into the surface. And you should be able to see that pink paint being revealed underneath. And this technique we call sgraffito. And the other options that we have available to us are to work on top. So now I'm going to take a little bit of this red. I might just switch my brushes here, and you may well have noticed me doing this in the last video, and switch to a thinner, finer brush, which is probably more appropriate when we're doing this kind of detailed work. And then on this one here, I'm going to just put across some nice red lines. Just like that. So again, making sure that I'm holding my brush towards the bottom, because it will give me much more control over what I'm doing. Now what I'm going to do now then is just work my way through my composition, adding in this detail, and I'm going to put one layer of pattern onto the different sections of my composition. I'm going to be using Fabric Lenny to help me, and we are going to be applying more than one layer, and when you look at his work in detail you will see those different layers and how they build up. Some of my marks will be quite controlled, and other marks will be a little bit more free and a bit looser. So just as you're watching, try and make a note of those different types of marks that I'm using and get a feel for it, so that you can start to apply that into your own work. So that's the first layer of pattern, and what we're going to do is let that dry, and then we'll come back and I'll do another video that shows you how to work into it and apply a second level of detail.